Hey guys, if you are enjoying this, you can head over to the Harry Talks Tech website where you can subscribe to my weekly newsletter. So jumping straight back in, we are busy with our currency converter API and we are going to touch the application layer of the project today. I'm super excited for this. I think the previous ones have been a little bit more tough, but this one I think is going to be more easy, and I feel like all these concepts we've been talking about in TDD are going to get wrapped together nicely and solidified for you guys. Looking at the application layer, it is one of the most important layers in our clean architecture. This is the layer that's going to coordinate everything together. It is like the conductor in an orchestra. The application layer is where all of our use cases live. Wherever something happens between more than one domain object and they need to coordinate together, such as you may retrieve an order, check up on the stock level, check if the customer's got a live profile, create a shipment. This may be wrapped up in a use case for your business and coordinated in the application layer. It's going to make the request to our infrastructure layer at the correct time, such as when it needs to receive currencies from the iExchange provider. You'll notice that the application layer does not have a direct dependency on the infrastructure layer. Rather, it defines its important interfaces, and the presentation layer injects the infrastructure layer through dependency injection. We're also going to be introduced to something called the factory pattern. In brief, search currency is one of our use cases, and it needs to get an exchange provider in order to load exchange rates. So it's going to ask the factory, hey factory, give me an exchange provider. And the exchange provider is going to give it either one or another exchange provider. Our application handler doesn't know and it doesn't care. It just cares that it gets an implementation of the iExchange provider interface where it can find the get exchange rates method. So first it's going to load an exchange provider, which gets loaded from the infrastructure layer, and then once it gets the exchange provider, it's going to use that to get exchange rates. So we could create like an AI provider which uses AI to return results or anything else. Just as long as it follows the same contract as an exchange provider, it'll be happy. Finally, jumping into the application layer, we can go ahead into our unit test project and create our applications folder. Then we can go ahead and create a currencies folder, and then the first test we're going to test is find latest should. Now we can do some initial setup, so let's go ahead and do that. Cool, so we're going to be using Mediator. We will be calling this the GetLatestHandler. So let's go ahead and generate this class. Cool, so we've done our initial setup for the handle. We have injected this iExchange provider factory. We've mocked the exchange provider factory. The first test we want to run is that find latest currency handler should get the provider. Great, so we've written our first failing test, and it's simple enough, the handler handle, and then we should verify that get provider runs once. So let's go and fix our failing test. Cool, so following the second rule, we're not making our code do more than it needs to pass the failing test. So in this case, I'm just calling get provider and inserting default. Awesome, so it has called this provider once. Next, we can get into values we'd like it to return. We just need to verify that it is going to be using the Frankfurter provider. Take note that in the infrastructure layer, we've already unit tested the specifics of get provider should, and get provider should, we are already checking that the functionality for getting the Frankfurter provider is correct. This is the actual unit test for this implementation. Using dependency injection and dependency inversion, the handler actually doesn't know which exchange provider it gets. We just need to verify that it is putting the correct param into the provider. Okay, great. So we have our failing test. Let's go and fix it. Cool. So the next thing we want to test is that if the exchange provider fails, the handler should fail. So let's write a test for that. Cool, so we've got our failing test. Let's go and implement it. Okay, awesome. So we have tested that it should fail when no provider is found. Great, so the next text I want to write is that it should call provider because we need the provider to give the data. So let's go ahead and write this test. Cool, so for this, I need to add another mock to my configuration, which can be used in all the tests. So I can go ahead and mock the iExchange provider interface. And now we can say that this method should return our mocked provider. Now we can verify that this call method is ran once. Great, so we've got the failing test, let's go fix it. Awesome, so we are calling the provider now. Okay, next test, I'd like it to fail with a response if the provider function fails. So we've set up the Exchange provider to return a failed result. So let's go ahead and write out our assertion for this. So we've got our failing test, let's go ahead and fix it. There's a null reference exception because we've implemented more of the code. So what we need to do is go ahead and create a mock. And perhaps it would be worthwhile to make an overall setup for the step in the constructor so that all the methods can use it. Okay, awesome. So let's make sure that it passes the correct params to the provider. We can go ahead and fix this failing test now. Awesome. So we've plugged the code in, so we should have a passing test. Okay, awesome. So we're making great progress. Next up, let's go ahead and make sure that this handler maps correctly to the expected response DTO. Awesome, so opening up our planning, we can go ahead and we can see what DTO we want this to return. So find latest currency handler, and here we can see that it should return the find latest currency DTO. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and paste these values. And now we can see what it should take in. So it should take in a string, and it should take in a date time, and it should take in this list of tuple, but let's rather create a concrete DTO for this. So of course none of these DTOs exist yet, so let's go ahead and create them. Awesome, so we've created our DTOs. Let's go and make this correspond. Cool, so we're done setting this unit test up. We can go ahead and implement the code for this. Okay, cool. So I have gone ahead with my strange indentation and mapped to my expected results. So we'll be jumping into that after this quick commercial break. Hey guys, just a quick note. Remember, you can all head over to the GitHub repository and look at the source code. Don't get too stressed if you can't pick up the quick flashing code that's typing in this video. The main idea is for you to pick up the principles of how to do TDD here and structure your projects. You can open up the source code and go and have a look at the actual implementation of this handle method and see everything that it's actually doing, as well as reading through all the passing tests and running them yourself. Jumping back into the original spec, we mentioned that it needs to perform caching for performance and resilience, and so what needs to happen is that the Exchange provider results should be cached, and this will be the application responsibility to get and set responses of our currency snapshots and cache them. So let's write unit tests for the caching. So first off, we should say it needs to call get cache, so let's do that. Cool, so here's our first unit test for the cache. Let's go and fetch this out. Awesome, so we call cache. So next up, let's go and do call cache with values. So this is where our datetime mock is going to come in. Now we're mocking the iTime provider interface, which we already unit tested in the infrastructure layer, and this returns datetime. We want to go and mock this because we obviously can't use the exact date time. It won't be what we want. I do want to do setup, make UTC now return correctly. So let's go ahead and run our unit test. Okay, we can see that it is not calling with the correct params, and so let's go ahead and fix it. Okay, awesome. So now we've got the passing test for call cache. Now we want to test that it calls set cache with the expected value. So let's do that. Okay, great. So let's go fix our failing test. Okay, awesome. So next, let's set cache with values. Cool. So let's go pass our failing test. Now, what about the whole thing of like, if it gets the cached value, it shouldn't try and call Frankfurter? What we can do is we can write our next unit test that says that Frankfurter should be run 0 times when the cache is present. So instead of times once, it should be times 0, never. All right, so now we can go and implement the logic to fix this. Okay, awesome. So with that now passing, I'm satisfied with what we've done. I think that this feature is developed. Find latest async is working according to me. And what's really awesome is that because our application layer is pretty simple, it's checking for a cache, calling the provider, mapping, and returning a result. We are going to be able to just copy and paste these tests, do some renaming, edit the mapping, and then we'll be golden. Easy peasy. I'm going to go ahead and copy paste for search async and convert async. Okay, awesome. So I just copied the unit tests from what we had already written for find latest, and I made it search should. And then all I had to do was change like the request and response models and change the mapping and change the cache key. Otherwise, the logic is exactly the same. So that was super easy. Cool. So stepping through, you're going to notice that it will get the snapshot, and then this was the little piece that I hadn't actually written unit test for, that it should skip over there and then it should map what we got from the cache instead of from the value there, and it should map that. Okay, awesome. So I have finished the convert. That was super easy because it is quite similar to the find latest. The main difference is that after it finds latest and performs all the same kind of ideas around caching and retrieval, it instead of just returning the response DTO, it performs the convert method on our domain layer, which we already tested extensively. You can see these were the tests for convert, which we wrote out. We've already unit tested and covered. So I don't have to go and try and like make the application layer responsible for making sure that the convert logic is correct. Thankfully, it's already handled in the domain layer test. And on my convert method, convert should, all I have to do is make sure that the application layer is calling and doing the correct things. I just had to change like the signature, which was the same as we had already planned in our mural. And I just had to make sure that after it retrieves the snapshot, it goes ahead and runs convert and returns the new DTO. So awesome, we are done with the first 4 videos. So that includes the project structure and planning and these 3 awesome parts, which was the domain, infrastructure, and application layer built fully with TDD. We're not done with tests yet. In the upcoming videos, we still need to use TDD to solve things like our dependency injection and some of our logging behavior, where we want to have full 100% unit test coverage on the project. And along with that, we'll start plugging in minimal APIs, our JWT authentication, our Docker Compose, API versioning, and we've already kind of touched the distributed caching, but we'll plug it in with Redis, and that'll touch on the Docker Compose sections. And I'm really excited. There's a bunch more cool things to come. Give this one a like and subscribe. Let's jump into the next stuff. Fun times ahead. Cheers, guys.